this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video review, and we're going to give some thoughts and review on the first full season of Starfleet Academy. Now there could be potential spoilers here, so just beware when going to this overall video. Now for anybody out there who possibly doesn't know what this is, Starfleet Academy is the latest series in the long-running iconic science fiction franchise of Star Trek, of course, and overall it's the 12th series and the latest in the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek, following the recent Star Trek Discovery, Lower Decks, and also Strange New Worlds and Star Trek Picard. Starfleet Academy itself is based in the 32nd century on planet Earth, post the series of Discovery, where we follow a new class of Starfleet recruits in over a century, and the training base is located in San Francisco, where we see the students complete their training on the campus, as well as carrying out certain exercises on the USS Athena starship. Over the show, we follow the young recruits over their various personal issues and dilemmas as they look to define their purpose both individually and also within Starfleet itself. Now look, there's no beating around the bush here. To say that the Star Trek franchise has at the very least been very divisive and also in decline is a massive understatement. Both commercially and critically, the franchise really has been faded in terms of the cultural space and cultural landscape. Typically, it has been accused, like so many other franchises, of sacrificing the essence of what the true franchise meant for the sake of wokeness, identity politics, and virtual signalling. Star Trek Discovery itself constituted a huge wave of criticism and debate, a lot of which I would say was largely justified. Well, having seen all of the movies and series within the franchise myself, I can safely say that Starfleet Academy is the worst series ever within Star Trek, and also one of the worst entries in science fiction television in general. Now we can list all of the many issues, but I think the worst one overall here in terms of the show is tone. The tone of the storytelling, the tone of the characters, where overall everything is far too flippant, too campy and too silly. Now yes, there have been many entries within the Star Trek franchise that have been far more comedic, far more lighthearted, and yes, we could even accuse these times of being a bit campy themselves. But in terms of Starfleet Academy, the approach is just too much. It's too over the top, to the point where I just couldn't take it seriously as an entry within the Star Trek canon. And despite the varying degrees of quality and success, one thing I can be absolutely sure of in terms of the Star Trek franchise is that there's always been a level of substance, of thematic depth, of thematic weight and gravitas that can at the very least give some semblance of importance and some semblance of relevance. I just don't get any of that when I'm watching Starfleet Academy, and what's telling here is that the overall chaotic and silly tone is absolutely intentional. When we look at all of the characters in terms of the setup, in terms of their race, their ethnicity, their orientation, their overall delivery and mannerisms, the showrunners clearly instilled these storytelling beats and elements because they knew it would trigger reaction, particularly on social media. Now we can debate as to whether these type of shows and elements should really warrant being triggered, especially online, but this is where we are at now culturally, where fan baiting and rage baiting is done so desperately so for the sake of views and trending within the algorithm. But something like Star Trek should always be above this type of thing. For me, it should be something that is always compelling, something that is to a degree very exciting and action-packed, yes, but it's also very insightful and very dramatic and thought-provoking at the same time. And Starfleet Academy once more has none of these elements. We could talk of all of the characters, all of them which lack a certain degree of depth or charisma or personality that's appealing or indeed believable. You just cannot look at any of these cadets and truly believe that they would one day become a certified distinguished member aboard a Starfleet and its crew. The majority of them just feel very stereotypical and leave very little impression. When we look at the lead character of sorts in Caleb, who is the typical dude bro rebel but has the genius and the potential but is constantly denying it, he is again a child of a single mother and is always carrying some sort of anger issues as well as a reckless abandon. We have the very obvious homosexual Klingon in Jaden, somebody who is struggling to find himself and is at conflict with who he is. We have easily one of the most annoying characters named Sam, who is a kind of hologram, who again wants to find her purpose, The whole point that she is a hologram, yet we see her currently going through human experiences such as getting drunk or drowning underwater or being shot at or incurring injuries, again, just doesn't bear any credible scrutiny. We have Genesis, who is the typical hot girl, independent, very smart, but at the same time very cynical, constantly trying to prove herself and spite her father, positioned to be greatness but constantly makes mistakes of her own rebellious nature. We have Tarima, who is in constant angst over her mental capacity and abilities in being able to touch and see the mental emotions of other individuals. This is, of course, in connection with her relationship with Caleb also. Now, there are other characters within the show. Of course, we have Holly Hunter's Nahal Aki, easily the most unbelievable Starfleet captain or admiral that we have ever seen within all of Star Trek. For some strange reason, she has this inability to sit still and is constantly walking around barefooted, crouched and sat down within sofas. Not quite sure exactly what Holly Hunter was trying to hone in terms of her performance, but it just never rang true, and again just gave constant discredit to the show throughout. Then there are various other characters, but again, I just don't have the time or the investment to go through every single one of them. And as I mentioned, they were all very much more stereotypical caricatures. Now, at one point, I can understand the show striving to be more relevant amongst the current audience, but at the same time, whatever series or iteration that you have in Star Trek previously, whether you like it or not, one thing that you could absolutely say is that the majority of the characters gave that absolute belief that they were somebody who was worthy enough to be aboard a starship and a member of Starfleet. They carried around a certain intelligence and a skill level and a capability, and I just don't see that within any of these members of the team. Whether it's Tatiana Maslany as Caleb's mother, or Paul Giamatti as the main villain of this season, Nazbraka. Again, very annoying, just constantly wading in with these big speeches and monologues, camping it up to 1,000%. Again, another villain that you could never take seriously. And in terms of the story itself, throughout various episodes, these largely consisted of characters just talking in corridors about their feelings and emotions, and this just wasn't very compelling in terms of science fiction television. There's very little in terms of the exploration or indeed space missions or training initiatives that really got you invested to see whether these characters could achieve their certain goals. Now, you could say if there was one positive, it was that the production sets are very high budget. In terms of the exteriors of the training academy and the sets inside, they all look very high production and high value. But once more, it has that current trend of modern day Star Trek where the aesthetic, particularly of the spaceships and the planets, has this very kind of ugly, disappealing feel to it. A lot of the time during the space sequences, you can barely make out what's going on. Everything is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. We have all of these laser beams and pew pew sounds all over the place, and it's much more disengaging rather than really putting you into the action. We are far from the days where we look at the likes of the Wrath of Khan or the Search for Spock or later on Deep Space Nine, where the space battles really carried a huge sense of awe and suspense and danger. And that's it really in terms of the production value, which is all I can say that is really positive about the show. I appreciate the fact that I can give them a slight bit of credit in that they did try to finally move on forward in terms of the Star Trek timeline. This wasn't a prequel story as what we had before, particularly with Star Trek Discovery, so I will give them that. But at the same time, just because something is new doesn't give it an automatic pass. And if you are still churning out these high budget entries within the franchise that are completely at odds with what it stands for, what it means, and what makes it so special, then you will fail every single time and you will turn away the fan base even more so that they are already. And sadly, Starfleet Academy is yet another example of content by nature rather than content by natural progression or organic development or substantial weight. All of the things that for me is what makes Star Trek so special in the first place. So there's my thoughts and feelings when looking back at the first season of Starfleet Academy. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other further movies, television series, or any other topics with the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover in the channel, then also let me know in the comments, and I'll see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.